Hello, everyone. Welcome to Zonan Canada. I'm your host, Jesse Betteridge. This is a podcast focusing on the connections between anime and Canadian media. And joining me once again on the show is Randy Forbister. Randy,
hey,
great to have you back.
Great to be back.
Yeah. What have you been up to lately? It's been about a year or two since you were last on.
Yeah. Most recently, I think I've been on a trip to Japan, and I immediately booked another one for this August.
Was this your first trip back since COVID started?
Yeah. It's my first trip back since COVID. Third trip overall, and this coming one's gonna be my fourth.
Yeah. I went on my last trip there in late 2019, right before COVID. Although I actually kind of right when it was actually starting, in reality, and then we are planning to go at the end of this year again, around the same time, around October. Nice. So I'm excited, but yeah, I'm expecting it to be quite different this time around. I hear contactless payments a big thing now.
Yeah, I definitely use my credit card a lot more this time. Luckily, Japan's pretty good about chip cards and tap. So most of the time, tap worked. Every once in a while, I'd have to insert and do the PIN. And then I used cash whenever I had cash on hand. But for like bigger purchases, I tended to go for my credit card. So like the One Piece store, I use my credit card. Anything over 100, I usually use my credit card for. And that was getting on my plan. I had friends who went. I think they went in February of 2020. They went for one of the Love Live concerts, and so like
normally
they were like on the edge. Right.
Normally, that's one of the best times to go is in February, but not in 2020. That's for sure.
No. I went there for over the New Year's break, the Christmas break. It was really interesting.
I hear it gets really crazy, specifically between Christmas and New Year. Like I know at one point, like you apparently it's hard to access ATMs and get cash at that time. I would imagine that might be a little different now, given the changes we've seen in recent years. Yeah.
I had zero issues anywhere. Even New Year's Day, I was told, oh, everything's going to be dead. There's going to be nothing open. Everything was open wherever I went. But I stayed in Asakusa and I went to Akihabara for the day to see like what lucky bags were around. And Akihabara was completely open. Asakusa was completely open. Asakusa I figured was going to be open because of the shrine and everything. But I was really surprised. It just didn't feel like anything was closed in Akihabara on New Year's Day, which was kind of shocking. I was going into it thinking like, oh, that's going to be my relaxing day. Nothing's going to happen that day. And I ended up like spending most of my day shopping.
Yeah. And it's still pretty accommodating for people who just speak English. I've heard stories of people in Japan being a little rustier with accommodating English speakers now.
No, if anything, I didn't have that at all.
Okay.
If anything, it's easier, I would say. I heard that a lot from people, that it was a lot easier to get around. My next trip I'm going to try to do a road trip around Kyushu area. So I'm looking forward to that. Not a lot around Kyushu. I'm mostly going to be staying around Kumamoto and Beppu for some onsens.
There's a place to go for that, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm really excited for that. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I don't want to forecast my trip too much because we're still in the midst of making plans. But I'm hoping to go to Hokkaido this time and do a few more northern focused things and spend a little more time in Kyoto as well. But yeah, really excited about that. But I did get my plane tickets. Was not the timing meant that I couldn't get those super cheap Zip Air tickets. They only sell them up until the end of October right now. You have to wait till like the summer until they go on sale for the rest. I'm just like, I can only buy the half of my trip.
Yeah,
I don't want to buy half of it now and then have to wait till July and then potentially have something go wrong and not be able to get my flights back. So we just got some reasonably priced Air Canada tickets. So
yeah, I ended up going WestJet for mine. If I would have bought like 3 weeks earlier, it would have been cheaper. But I was like hoping for something a little lower and never ended up manifesting. But I ended up getting a decent deal.
Yeah. It's
for summer is not the greatest for travel time. but if you wait and are patient and jump when you think you should, you can probably do okay.
Yeah, as long as you don't have too many annoying layovers, it's
my flights are like glorious this time, actually. Yeah. Very nice.
Yeah, I got all direct flights, so I'm excited about that part. Yeah. So and you're still running Icon, is that right?
Yep, that's coming up real soon. Yeah, we just closed our panel submissions, so I have a lot of work to do. This is like when my job really starts in kind. Mm-hmm. So I got a lot to plan, a lot to prep. Showings are really hard this year since Crunchyroll.
I've heard it's become a lot more difficult to license content to screen at conventions now.
Sony Crunchymation has pretty much ghosted everybody from conventions.
Yeah. So whoever could have seen this coming?
Yeah. Shocker. Yeah. Complete shocker. So yeah, it's lots of like contacting Sentai Filmworks, and Sentai Filmworks only things that are on disc you can screen, which is a whole other hurdle. Discotheque is great, thankfully. Most of the smaller places are good about stuff, and then G Kids makes you pay a big fee. Yeah. So like there are workarounds that you can do, and like I had a Crunchyroll person tell me like, no one's actually going to sue you for showing something without permission because the optics would be just terrible.
Yeah.
I'm still not going to do that, but hearing that from like a Crunchy person on their way out kind of like made me feel a little better about like, oh, if I make a mistake, it's not going to be a huge deal.
What a scenario we're in with that now. At Sakura-Con this year, like there was literally no anime screened at all. There were they didn't even run a movie. Mm-hmm. Or anything. It was
I was looking.
It was amazing. The first anime con I've been to, like no anime running at all.
I was looking at the Anime North schedule, and I don't know if I just looked at the wrong schedule, like just a panel schedule, but I didn't see any screenings at all.
Yeah, they should. Yeah, they should still be running like at least a room with some old stuff. I'm not able to get there this year, unfortunately. Sorry if you were expecting me to do a panel or something this year. But yeah, I can't get there this year. But yeah,
I saw Dave Merrill was posting about his programming block.
Yeah.
Which
they got at least something like that going.
Stuff.
Yeah. It's all unlicensed stuff. As for licensed stuff, I haven't seen any indication for that at Anime North. There was some stuff screening at SakinoCon, which I couldn't make it to because I had COVID at the time. But I don't know what the whole situation with that was, and that is like the teeniest of teeny cons. So yeah conventions are tough right now. It's not the easiest thing in the world. Just needs a little more elbow grease this time around, which is not fun for someone who's been doing this for a while and has a good rhythm. I think a lot of people are getting caught off guard by this and resulting in situations like I mentioned, we saw it at Sakura-Con with like no content screening whatsoever. And also with today the main thing we're going to be talking about is the movie Gundam SEED Freedom, which is technically at the time of recording still in theaters in Canada. There was a preview panel for it at Sakura-Con, and they had Hoshi Surichiro and Rie Tanaka there doing a panel and some representatives from Bandai Namco, and they did the whole panel and the introduction and discussion about the film, but they didn't actually screen the film. They only screened the first 6 minutes of it, but the actual film was screened at Anime Boston, which did not have any of the actors or representatives from Bandai Namco at it, which I guess you could call a typical Bandai or Sunrise move when it comes to marketing Gundam.
Well, then they did the big screenings in LA where they had like the actors come.
Yeah, I know. You could was it LA and New York? They had big preview screenings for it. You pay like an exorbitant fee to see it. And see some of the Japanese and English voice actors present. It was like a whole event, and they made a big deal about that before saying anything about a more general release of the film, which is when they released the U.S. and Canadian release, or they announced the U.S. and Canadian release at Sakura-Con.
I think you got like a model kit with it or something. You got some kind of benefit that didn't quite match the cost, but still worked out. Like you got something a little extra, so that's But I saw people bemoaning the price a little.
Oh yeah.
For a movie of like this.
And what a movie of this it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, before we dive in, I wanted to just touch on a couple other movies that have come out lately. So we both saw End of Evangelion, which there was a little fear that we wouldn't get it at all because G Kids did a what was touted as a North American release of the movie. It was only in the United States that they did an actual wide release with Fathom, but there was what was little known was that they were making it available to art house theaters. It showed up in a bunch of theaters in Ontario, and then thankfully both the VIF Center and Rio Theater picked it up in Vancouver, and it also screened in Winnipeg.
Yes, I think was one of the John Barber Cinematheque.
Yeah, I don't know if any other cities screened it. I think any other cities outside of Ontario, apart from Vancouver or Winnipeg, screened the movie. At least I haven't heard of that happening.
Ontario did a bunch.
Yeah, there were a bunch in Ontario.
Yeah.
But like I didn't hear of anything in Alberta or Quebec or anything. So it's kind of crazy. How did you find seeing that movie in theaters? I'm sure, like me, you've seen it like 30 times.
I've seen it so many. It's probably it teeters between my favorite or my second favorite movie of all time, and that's generally been pretty consistent over the past since I saw it. I was really nervous that I wasn't going to be able to see it because the first screening was on a day when I was at a party. But luckily they added another screening, and it was like a later screening, so I was able to go at night after I finished I have 2 jobs, so I finished my second job. I was able to go after.
They have they wound up adding like 3 screenings at VIF. It was it did pretty well, unsurprisingly, because it is. I mean, if there's any anime movie you want to see in theaters, it's going to be the End of Evangelion.
Right.
Yeah.
I really didn't know how I was going to react to it because 3.0 plus 1.0, or the 4th movie, really put a big bow on all of Evangelion and really made me feel like, oh, I'm done with it. It's okay to be done with it. But then going back and watching it, I was like, oh yeah, this is great. I still got a lot out of it. But I was really curious how I was going to react to it after a modern headspace.
Yeah.
And going back to it, I ended up still having a really good time with it. And it's still up there in my favorites. Like the imagery of that movie alone, nothing beats it, I think.
Yeah, if you're a person who was lucky enough to have your first experience watching End of Evangelion in theaters, I am envious because
I couldn't imagine
that would have been an amazing experience, largely because I am pretty confident that movie was, when they made that movie, they really only were thinking about the theatrical experience, what the cinematic experience watching that movie in a theater was going to be. That is a movie that was made to be watched in theaters. I don't think that they even really made any consideration of what the home viewing experience for that would be. Because there's obvious stuff like when you're seeing the theater reflected back at you. That's probably what you immediately think of.
Absolutely amazing. In the theater.
Oh yeah, that is just as wild as you expect it to be in an actual movie theater. But there's also stuff like when Maya's cowering on the ground and you see her reaching upwards, and then it cuts to her pinching Alba's shoulder or arm. Yeah. Stuff like that just it is really crazy to see on a theater screen, and it's a very, very different from watching it in a very low resolution real media file, which I think that is how many of us first saw it.
The old manga DVDs.
Yeah, with the letterboxing. And they can contrast to 3.0 plus 1.0, which was very much a more modern production that was took into consideration that most people are going to watch this streaming. In fact, it was not initially released in theaters here. It was released streaming internationally. That wasn't reveling in the novelty of being in a movie theater, because that was Hideaki Anno's first theatrical film, I believe. Or at least that he directed. I don't think
End of Evangelion, you mean?
End of Evangelion, yeah. Yeah,
because he did the live action movies afterwards.
They were after, yeah. He just immediately went on to Love and Pop, and then a little while later Ritual after that. But yeah, I just love how it just like revels in being cinematic, and all the, you really get a new appreciation for all the absolute nonsense running on the computer screens in that movie when you see it on a big screen. It's so great.
It was like it was really something else. And the really good thing about my art house theater is that the best seats are actually like the front row.
Oh wow!
Because like the screen is like it's a smaller screen, but there's enough of a stage area and the chairs are enough that like it's the exact right angle, and it's such a good experience to see. It's my preferred seat at that theater is the front row at this point. It's just really cool.
Wow!
And like being able to see things that big was just great.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's one of those unique places where the front row is actually the best.
Yeah, I've never found this to be the case in any theater, so that's pretty cool. Disappointing that G Kids only put that, didn't make a wide release of that. Also, they've been getting a little spotty with their Canadian releases again. I found
they have,
because they're not doing Ghibli Fest in Cineplex. Those are all showing up just in art house theaters from what I've seen.
I didn't even take a look because
that's already started. Yeah.
Shoot, you're right. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. And I caught the Concierge as well, which got a very blink and you'll miss it screening at VIF Center. Largely because I told them about it. I was asking if they'd run Concierge, so thing to establish is that right now Crunchyroll seems to be capable, or Crunchyroll Films or Sony Pictures, whatever entity is putting anime movies in theaters for Sony. They seem to be capable of making a 2,000 screen release across North America with the Spy Family movie, which was great. I saw that as well. I got a later screening. It was running for quite a while. I enjoyed that quite a bit. It's a standalone movie, but that works for Spy Family pretty well because
it does.
Most of Spy Family is standalone stories. It was a lot of fun. It was cool that got released as just like this general family movie. Yeah. And with a wide release. And I mean, I've seen people say it underperformed, but it seemed to do fine. It wasn't like a massive box office surprise success, but it seems like it was successful and justified its large release. So that's really all you can hope for.
Yeah. I think Spy Family is a series that kind of gets memed a little more than actually watched sometimes. So I'm not entirely surprised about that. That was the movie that was like front and center when I was in Japan. Like everywhere there were ads for that. Of course there were. So I was excited to finally see it. I thought about seeing it in Japan and I decided against it because I just didn't want to waste my time seeing a movie. I'm going to change that this next trip. But I saw it, and this is actually my first time really watching the anime version. I've kept up with the manga, but I haven't really needed to watch the anime. And I was really I guess it's a criticism I have, is that I think it focuses a little too much on Anya's reactions a lot of the time. And I didn't really feel like that was the case in the manga, because I probably could just skip over it a little more. And I noticed that the anime really like kind of hovers on that a lot of the time, which I thought was
it really revels in it a lot more.
Yeah, not entirely to my liking, but the movie I thought was really fun. The weird, like the oddly good animation sequence when Anya just needs to poop was bizarre, and I really like that part.
That was a wonderful surprise. That's when it evolved from a merely enjoyable film to something maybe a little special. For at least to some degree. But bizarre. Yeah, but with as I was trying to talk about the Concierge, and then I went on a
sorry.
No, it's fine. We should talk about the Spy Family movie. We're talking about movies. The Concierge. It seems that Sony is capable of putting out like a giant wide release like that, or a release that is so small that it may be non-existent. Because I think the Concierge, it would be generous to say it even got a release. It seems like it showed up in like some film festivals. Maybe a few independent theaters have shown it. I had initially asked if VIF Center would show it during their like little anime event they had a few months ago, and they said, "Oh, Sony is like so difficult to get anything from right now." it's like, following this weird trend where they just license this stuff and just do everything in their power to keep people from actually accessing and watching it. But then I saw that TIFF Lightbox was showing it in Toronto. So I'm just like, hey guys, just so you know, TIFF Lightbox found a way to do this. I'm sure you can too. And they managed to secure a few screenings. And it's a fun movie. It is very delightful. Lots of it's about a concierge who works in a department store that is patronized by animals, many of whom are endangered, and it has lots of great observations about customer service and about animal gags, and I liked it a lot. It's very charming. I highly recommend it. It's also very short. It's only an hour and 10 minutes long, but not every movie has to be long. That's fine. But yeah, it was like it had basically no release, and it's probably because it's not connected to any kind of franchise or notable names. I think even the director, this was his first movie that he had that they had directed. But yeah, it's just like you'd think that Sony would like give this something of a push, but it just got absolutely nothing, and there's no indication that it's even going to be streaming or anything like that. I'm just like, what are you doing? Like, what are you guys doing? Come on.
I'm sure it'll appear somewhere. I've been interested in that one.
Yeah, I recommend it. It's great if you're able to see that. But yeah, let's get to the main topic for today, which is a very special movie, which has been running in theaters this month, called Gundam SEED Freedom, a movie 18 years in the making. And obviously 18 years wasn't long enough for them to come up with a better title. This movie's release was an example of one of my favorite things, which is when audiences in Canada have an opportunity to directly demonstrate that their outsized demand for something has been extremely underestimated. Because the release for this initially was that it would be released over 2 days in the United States and over 1 day in Canada. It would be on the 7th in Canada and the US, and the US would have an extra day to screen the dub on the 8th of May in 2024. And that seemed, something to be thankful for, because I think that a lot of people were not expecting that it would get released in Canada at all. Because Sunrise has had a very bad track record with that. What releases have they done so far? There was the Gundam NT movie that was US only.
Yeah, the last Gundam thing I saw was Doan's Island.
Yeah, so Kukuru's Doan's Island did get released in Canada, but that was because it was done in partnership with Crunchyroll, who, they can get stuff out there. But, Gundam NT, the Char's Counterattack release, probably also would have been the case with the first Hathaway movie if COVID hadn't forced that one to just be a streaming-only release. But Sunrise's track record with getting anything out in Canada was pretty bad. So, when I heard that they were only going to do it, they were going to do a 1-day release in Canada at all, I was pretty happy. And then tickets went on sale for it a little over a month in advance. And I had, by the time I even heard about the theater that was playing it in Vancouver, and it was just one theater at that time, the tickets had been on sale for, I think, just a couple of hours, and I got one of the very last good seats in that theater. It was almost sold out, more than a month in advance. And as time went by, as we got closer to the screenings, they started adding more theaters, usually in really kind of awkward times in smaller theaters, but it was, still adding to meet demand. Then they expanded it to a second day. Then they expanded it to a third day. Then they expanded it to 10 days. And then it got expanded again, and it is to the point that at our time of recording this, on May 21st, it's still playing in a number of cities, in Vancouver and Toronto, Edmonton and Montreal. So definitely proved that the demand was underestimated. Again, as is often the case with Gundam marketing in North America, they don't really know what they're doing. They don't pay attention to trends. They don't know where the actual demand for something lies. And definitely a lot of demand to see this Gundam Seed movie after so long here in cities in Canada. And I'm glad that they sort of got the message on that.
Yeah, so it was similar here. There were 2 showings up for a while, And I eventually decided, like, well, if these are the only 2 days, I'm curious about this movie. I guess I'll go see it. So I got one of the last seats for like the 10 o'clock p.m. showing. And then a few days later, they added screenings in the better theater to see it in. Our Landmark theater is really good, and they added screenings there, but it was already too late for me to change the tickets around. But
you had to snap them up. I mean,
I had to snap them up.
It seemed like an urgent situation.
Yeah, like the 7 o'clock show was sold out. That was where there were only front seats, and that's a theater where you don't want the front seats. Yeah. But I ended up being pretty happy that I got tickets for.
Yeah, from what I'm seeing, the shows aren't selling out anymore, but people still seem to be snapping up tickets for this and going to see it. So definitely some broad interest. It essentially got in the end, I guess you'd say it was a limited wide release, even though I think this was a situation where Sunrise was probably paying Cineplex and Landmark to run them. And that's probably why it took them so long to get them added, because they, you start making that kind of deal, and then the expectation is that Sunrise will keep paying to get them put into more screenings. That's my guess on that. And apparently TIFF Lightbox played it at that giant theater in Toronto as well. So they had a few angles figured out. So Randy, how would you describe a movie like Gundam SEED Freedom? Would you say this is a good movie?
No, absolutely not. It was really interesting because I was really not looking forward to this movie whatsoever. And like I started seeing ads for it all the time. And this is the last one I'm going to bring up my Japan trip, I promise. We went to the Gundam in Yokohama, and they were preparing for the Gundam SEED movie. So what they did was, against the wall, they had the entire mural from both of the endings, like,
oh, that's cool.
Splayed right out. It was super cool.
Yeah.
And then when the Gundam was moving, it was it rotated music between Gundam SEED and SEED Destiny while the Gundam was doing all its stuff, which was great because I think the music is easily the best part of Gundam SEED.
I think everyone can agree with that statement at the very least.
So.
Yeah.
But in terms of characters and in terms of everything else, I really wasn't looking forward to it. I dropped off Destiny right when the wedding happened. And really never really intended to go back. I ended up watching a recap video for Destiny before I saw the movie, and I'm very glad I did. But going into it, I didn't know what to expect, and I got one of the most dumbest but most fun movies I've seen in a while. That's where I ended up with it.
Yeah, so I feel that so I will say there's a lot of problems with Gundam SEED. I do think that when people say that they hate Gundam SEED, this is usually a statement not of like whether or not you actually like something or hate something. It's a statement of principle most of the time, and I get that. Like, my enthusiasm for SEED has definitely faded over the years. I still like the original series a lot. I think it does a lot of things well. Like the second last episode of that original series, I think is still one of my favorite anime episodes ever. It's just so intense. And it's just such a rush at the end. It's so fun to watch. Yeah. And, of course, also Gundam SEED kind of reinvigorated interest in Gundam in general back in the 2000s, because it was the franchise was seen as kind of dead after Gundam X, with Turn A just kind of being this anniversary thing that they did. And I've always found the rules to be like that, or the rule always seems to be like the Gundam OVAs are always good and the movies are always bad. But the movies can also be interesting in a way that you may not have expected. And I think this is a movie that's it's not good. It's not really trying to be good, but it's trying to deliver catharsis to people who watched SEED and Destiny like 15 to 20 years ago.
I think it's a really good way of putting it, for sure.
I think it delivers that. I do feel that if you ever enjoyed, and I wasn't looking forward to this movie either. I thought it was just going to be like a just soulless drag with dwelling on like the worst aspects of like Kira and Lacus and all these characters that have just that just are not really that engaging to watch when they're executed most of the time. But I do think that if you have ever enjoyed Gundam Seed to any capacity at all, I think you will probably walk out of this movie satisfied. It might take a while for it to click, but something in this movie will probably click with you. And I guess we'll for further discussion, maybe we'll just try to avoid spoilers, although it's not like the plot of this movie is really that important.
No.
It's not like the script. Chiaki Murasawa, the writer of Gundam Seed, who sadly passed away a few years ago. So apparently this script was written in 2006, or around 2008, shortly after Destiny ended and just for various reasons didn't get produced. I would be very surprised if the movie that was conceived of at that time really in any way resembled what we got here. Because this isn't really concerned with telling a story. It's not concerned with fixing Gundam Seed and its like disastrous end at the end of Destiny. I don't think any Gundam series ended in a sorrier state than like the Cosmic Era did at the end of Gundam Seed Destiny. It's such a mess. Absolutely. It's such a disaster.
No, and the surprising thing about this movie is this movie picks up directly after and expects you to know exactly what happened at the end of Seed Destiny, which I think is just a crazy move, because they must know that people didn't like Destiny, and they must know that people didn't watch Destiny, but this is just, you might as well have watched it directly following the last episode of Destiny, because it just continues directly from it.
It wants to try to make up for your suffering of getting through Gundam Seed Destiny. I do admire that, like, it doesn't ignore Destiny or like ignore its worst elements or try to pretend it didn't happen or anything, because you can't. And that's the big problem, is that it ends in probably a worse state than I think any other Gundam show does. And and that's sad, because Gundam Seed was so big, it was so popular, and it just fizzles out. Like, they tried their best to fix it with Final Plus, and then they made, I guess they made a worthy effort to try and fix Gundam Seed Destiny with like the compilation movies, which I guess are technically an improvement, but I feel that if you want to have the Gundam Seed Destiny experience, it's dishonest to try and watch a better version of Gundam Seed Destiny. It's like you're not getting the real experience unless you're watching that train wreck. That starts so strong and then just gets so very, very bad.
I was just about to say, the start of Gundam Seed Destiny is really strong.
It is so great. It's like really the best part of those. It's maybe the best part of the Cosmic Era stuff. Is those first 6 episodes of Gundam Seed Destiny. That's why it's a train wreck, because it starts strong and then it derails so badly. And there's a lot of parallels between this movie and Destiny. Not just like, it reuses plot elements, and I think a reason for that is because it's trying to make good on the things that were brought up in Gundam Seed Destiny, and trying to do something entertaining with them. And I mean,
like, it reuses the big bad enemy, the big bad weapon, completely.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's the main villain, who is this. In my notes, I said he's an incel who performs NTR through ring hypnotism, which that is actually exactly what he does.
Yep. God, this movie's great.
No, take our word for it. It's awesome. It's actually awesome. But he's enacting the same plot that Durandal did in Gundam Seed Destiny, and this is all treated with like with the weight as if all this was actually important or engaging in some way, even though it wasn't. But again, it's just trying to make good on that. And the thing is that you can't fix Gundam Seed at this point. With the way Gundam Seed Destiny ended, it's just not possible. If you're hoping for just like a return to the halfway believable politics and world building we saw in that first series, it cannot come back. You cannot go back to that. Like the Stargazer OVAs, which were good. I read like that OVA is really good. It's notable that when in their last effort to make like a kind of respectable version of Gundam Seed, it takes place at the exact moment that Destiny stopped being good, or stop being credible, which is like after about episode 6. That's
Yeah.
what that specifically said. It's just like, okay, we can't do anything serious after this point. We can't even try to do anything respectable or like do actual good storytelling at for anything after this point in time. You have to just kind of dive in, make it as stupid and crazy as you possibly can. And I think that's why this movie works, because it just hits the stupid button for 2 hours, in ways that I think they kind of resisted in Destiny. Like you mentioned that you fell off of Destiny during the wedding point,
Yeah.
and I always felt that was the around that part of the series was when the director Mitsuo Fukuda just kind of gave up, because there were all these problems. They didn't plan it out very well. Chiaki Morisawa was sick and couldn't get her scripts in on time, and there was all these executive demands and these weird perceptions of what the audience wanted. And there's a certain point when it just becomes infuriatingly cynical. Yeah. Like it's just like, you can't believe that there's this great reluctance to just giving in to stupidity in Gundam Seed Destiny. And in this movie, it's like they're kind of doing the same thing, but they've realized that why don't we just embrace the stupidity? And it works. It really works.
So somehow it works.
Yeah.
I didn't say before, but like Gundam Seed was pretty formative for me. Like, it came out right when I was in like grade 10, grade 11, in that range. And then Seed Destiny was coming out at that time in Japan, so I was kind of watching them both at the same time. Mm-hmm. Just the way things worked. And then like I ended up not being able to wait for the YTV broadcast for Seed, so I ended up downloading the fan subs and watching them all right away.
I think that was the experience for a lot of people.
Yeah, because it was just, nothing hit me in that way. And like you said, the finale was so exciting and so good. Like, it just had this really good climax, especially if you're like a melodramatic teenager. Mm-hmm. It really hit the right buttons.
It sure. Totally does. Yeah.
And so going into this one, I had heard kind of the plot of it, because again, I didn't care. Because why would I? And I was like, oh, is that the plot? That sounds dumb. And then a part of my brain is like, but doesn't that sound like you want to see it? And I was like, you know what? Yeah, I do. And I saw it, and it really was as dumb as I was hoping it would be. I ended up seeing it by myself just because I didn't have anyone to go with.
Me too.
But I was cackling at some points of that movie. Just when there were some parts like Power of Love, just the dumbest stuff, and it just was making me howl with how it was just implemented and how it was going. And I was like, of course this is how they solve it, because how else would they solve it? It has to go this way. There was actually a lot that I liked with this movie too. The thing I like the most is the redemption of Shin, I think.
Yeah, it was a little, the way they did it, it's a little like, it bothers me a little bit, because sometimes it kind of feels like their way of redeeming Shin is just to make him Kira's lackey and be happy to be Kira's lackey. And that's kind of that is a little bit of what's going on. But they also
make him a little shit.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I think making him a little shit really, really works.
This is stuff they all kind of lost control of during Gundam Seed Destiny. It's just like, how much of a shit should this guy be? How much of like this dark, tortured soul should he be? And how do we balance these things? And they just stopped asking those questions after a certain point. Yeah. And it's just a tragedy, because he's actually a really good character. There's so much they could have done with him if they just let him be the protagonist of Gundam Seed Destiny. Yeah. But again, it just completely unraveled. And they kind of build Shin's character in this, not only trying to just poke at the more interesting elements of his character that they didn't really explore properly in Destiny, but also just looking at how he was a shit, how his perception of him kind of grew through Destiny, and finding a way to still kind of not throw that out, but still kind of make it work in a way that's kind of funny and surprising in a lot of ways. And again, it worked. Like, you wouldn't expect it to, but it does work.
Yeah, I think he was one of my favorite parts of the movie, for sure. Just because, like, he kept things real, and he just was able to just keep his character path. He was consistent, and his thing with Luna Maria I thought was really cute. The entire movie, it worked. It really worked for me, which I was not expecting whatsoever.
There's one interesting thing with the characters. I think they also, another lesson they kind of learned from Destiny is that by default, for some reason, the audience is going to hate any new characters that you try to introduce. So they're just like, hey, let's just make all of them unlikable dicks. All these new characters we introduce, they'll just be all horribly unlikable people, and you can just revel in hating them so much, which worked for a lot of them. It also exposes one maybe my biggest problem with the movie, which is the character of Agnes Geibenrath. Who she is played by Hoko Kuwashima. And okay, so here's the thing about Gundam Seed. I've always felt that Gundam Seed is kind of weird because there's a lot of good things about the series. Like I think Gundam Seed does a good job of kind of depicting extremism, kind of depicting people going over the edge, and how those things can kind of intersect in interesting ways. There's a lot of the same things that Zeta Gundam tried to handle, and I feel did not execute it well. Gundam Seed does that kind of thing in maybe a shallower way, but they always execute it in a way that's more compelling, which I think kind of makes it better at doing that kind of thing in the end. Whereas, so there's always this kind of but there's always this dissonance between what Gundam Seed does well and what people like about it. And it always bugged me. It's like, there's all these good things about Gundam Seed, but people just seem completely fixated on this like bizarre kind of fairy tale element of like Kira and Lacus's relationship that defies logic in some terrible ways at times. And then we have the character of Flay Ulster from the original series, who is the best character in all of Gundam Seed.
Absolutely my favorite.
Absolutely. Maybe one, like, until Witch from Mercury came out, I would have argued she was one of the best female characters in Gundam, period. But everyone hates her. And I mean, that's kind of the point, but people also miss the point of her in many ways. So and I think you see a lot of this in Agnes. She often seems like a very cruel parody of Flay Ulster. She has the same voice actress. She is a very superficially, she embraces all the superficial aspects of Flay, and she's just like kind of being put on display for you to just like just yell at her and hate her. And I mean, it's a little sad because it feels like she represents what fans thought of Flay, and the movie doesn't really seem to be that critical of it. No. Which is unfortunate. Also, she's basically a Zeta Gundam character. She seems like she's straight out of Zeta Gundam, which is one of the problems with that show. But Agnes kind of bothered me. I didn't much appreciate her presence in this, even though she's just yet another character with heightened illogical emotions, just being kind of thrown back and forth throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, I think probably my least favorite character, just because I don't think they knew what they were doing, and I just, of all the illogical things in this movie, her turn was the most illogical. I feel like I just did not get it, did not drive with it, did not think it was the right decision for this movie. Like, I don't even know why you would have a character like that here, if not just to like
she's a bit of a Tomino throwback, honestly. Yeah. But again, one that's not needed, and that's the kind of thing that's the kind of thing that Seed kind of did better with that kind of character, and yeah, you're seeing it kind of devolve with that character, which is unfortunate. Should we even talk about the plot of this movie? It starts out like Gundam 00. Which I thought was kind of funny because it does make me wonder, since this movie was written around the same time that Gundam 00 came out, and all these Gundam plots, like the basic plots of these shows, they all come from the same place, regardless of what universe they're in. There's like just the writer's room at Sunrise, where they just kind of crank out these scenarios and just kind of fit them into things. That's just roughly how they have done most of their mecha shows over the years, and the Gundam plots all kind of come from the same place. But it starts out like Gundam 00, where Kira and Lacus have started this new faction called Compass, which Compass was a acronym. I was surprised by how few acronyms there were in this movie. They went really light on that.
They still did a few, but
they did a few, yeah.
Yeah.
Compulsory observational. I'm just reading the wiki. Compulsory observational making peace service.
You're right.
It's Compass,
okay.
or Comps, pronounced as Compass, and they're basically just designed to intervene and stop people from fighting in the in the very tumultuous time of Cosmic Era 75. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Lacus is president, and then there's a new nation that had been around but nobody was really aware of or really paying attention to up until this point, called Foundation. Yeah. Which, they team up with Compass at first, and then it was all kind of a trap, and it was all this, the guy running it, his mother, who is this small woman, and I can't remember if they even explained why she was so short and looked like a child.
I feel like they did, but I feel like that could just been, they showed a picture of her small as a child before, and they showed that she just didn't age, and I think you're just supposed to think that it's some coordinator shenanigans.
Yeah, like she was doing some genetics experimentation, and this involved, I guess I won't spoil too much, the parents of certain characters, and everyone's just been tinkered with and is a superhuman for no reason. But yeah, she's like this geneticist, and then her son Orphe is he is the villain. He's the guy who has taken on the mantle of Durandal's destiny plan, which makes sure that all people have a prescribed or are prescribed a role at birth and are expected to live out that role, which is the opposite of freedom, obviously. Yeah. And yeah, he's an incel, and he tries to, he had a ring, and Lacus also had another ring, and he like controlled her using the ring. And
they were genetically designed to be with each other.
To be with each other. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Which is
predestined. Yeah. You just throw out the names of the Gundams, the Destiny, the Freedom, and then somehow you craft a theme for this film.
The mom is voiced by Yukari Tamura, and that she has a very distinct voice, and it kind of took me out of it right away. Mm-hmm. She has a very like high pitched, notable voice. She was in Higurashi. She was Mimette in Sailor Moon S as well. Just like one of those like really
right. She is. Voice. She was. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting to see her here. I thought this whole plot just baffled me.
If you sat down and you like mapped it all out, I'm sure everything would make sense. But if you take the time to do that, you're missing the point.
Yeah. And the second you try to explain to somebody, you sound like a crazy person.
Yeah. If someone were to walk into this movie with no knowledge of Gundam Seed at all, this would just be the most idiotic nonsense they've ever seen in their life. And I don't know how they would react to it. Like if you walked off the streets and watched End of Evangelion with no knowledge of Evangelion, you would see a baffling but very compelling story whose themes are still very clear. There's none of that here. None of that here.
Not at all.
Yeah, it's not. They're not focused on any kind of thematic conclusion. They're not focused on making any sense or wrapping up any storylines. If you were hoping for an explanation of how Mu La Flaga survived into Gundam Seed Destiny, just throw that out the window, because you're not getting that here. You're not getting anything explained.
Yeah. And as a non-Destiny watcher, I just like, he is just back to Mu La Flaga.
Yeah.
There is nothing of that old character in there. And I was I just like, did they just forget about that? Was like,
yeah.
It feels like they just forgot about his whole arc there and just put him like, oh, it's Mu La Flaga, he's back. Let's make the impossible possible.
Yeah. Maybe that was for the best.
Yeah. So.
I don't know. Speaking of Mu La Flaga, so I think obviously controversy because Gundam Seed was all redubbed with an LA cast. That is the dub we got in theaters. I think there was a little miscommunication with Cineplex about which version was playing on which days, so I think a lot of people wound up seeing that new English dub instead of the Japanese subtitled version, which was I would expect that people would probably have found disappointing, because there's a lot of controversy specifically not only about the recasting but of how they pronounce certain things, like Lacus's name. She's Lacus. Which is not how they pronounce it in Japanese. I need to point out. So that, all sorts of like bafflings, Bandai decisions like that. But they do one cool thing that would have been, I guess maybe is one reason to check out the dub, is because they do bring Trevor Devall back as Mu La Flaga. He reprises the role in that movie. So it was always, I think people were really frustrated that they didn't get him back for the redubs of the series, because he lives in LA now. He lives and works in LA now. So he's part of that pool. But they did get him back for this, and I will give that move a thumbs up. That was I'm glad they did that.
And was cool. Speaking of returning actors, Chris Hackney is also back as Atherin. We didn't talk about Atherin at all, but Atherin I think is the best part of this movie.
He is great. He only has a small role, or a smaller role in this. He's not a main character, and I think that was a good decision. So yeah, I guess maybe we should talk about the actual best part of the movie.
There's to me there's two best parts, and they both involve Atherin.
Yes.
The first best part is when Kira is bemoaning and saying, "I'm the only one who can do this."
In his whiny, his Hoshi Soichiro going all in on whiny Kira. And it's glorious, whiny Kira.
Yeah, and then Atherin just punches the shit out of him. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
Apparently, this was the one thing that Chiaki Murasawa wanted to make sure happened in this movie, was Atherin punching Kira. She's like, this is like, if anything happens in this movie, this has to be in the final movie no matter what. And it's like, this is like the one key thing that's been preserved, and they've just been sitting on since 2007 or 2008. And it is the correct thing to do. Yeah. It's like the perfect expression of like everything that is idiotic and compelling about these two characters wrapped in this one scene. It's so great. I think I know the other scene you're talking about with Atherin. This is something I think maybe not to spoil, because I think this is best left as a wonderful surprise closer to the end of the movie.
It's so good.
It'll get you. I guarantee that part's gonna get you. It's so good.
It's so dumb, but it works.
Yeah. It's it's dumb and funny in a way that you would never even expect of Gundam Seed at all. No. And it's just like, they've just elevated this to a new level. It's so good.
Yeah, I think like, speaking of like the punch scene, it speaks to something that I did like about this movie. And there's actually a really good article from a blog called Analog Hoso that I followed for a long time about Kira as a salaryman, and how he's taken on this manager role and refuses to let anyone else do things because he thinks he's the only one who can, and how it really damages the relationships around him. And I think this movie actually handles that pretty interestingly and kind of good, to the fact where like he's ignoring his wife, he's ignoring those around him, and taking things on himself, and it really kind of challenges that whole Jesus Yamato thing that went around, and I thought that was really interesting for this movie. It worked in a way that it was a little bit of depth that I really wasn't expecting from this. I was expecting, Kira's the best, blah, blah, blah. Maybe he's sad for a bit, and then this happens. And the movie doesn't quite do that, which I thought was good. It still does that a little bit.
It finds a balance where they can still kind of do that, deliver the God Kira stuff that the audience really wants for some reason, just eats up for some reason that I don't understand. I don't get why people love that so much. But they also found ways that they can make him vulnerable, show flaws in him, which is something they had always been afraid to do, especially in Destiny. That's one reason Destiny is terrible, is that Kira is just not allowed to have flaws. And also in the HD remasters of the series, they make little edits here and there, which take out any indication that he is responsible for killing someone.
Yeah.
Or
well, if you gave him flaws, he couldn't be number 1 on the new type.
Yeah, exactly. Right? And again, absolutely bizarre executive meddling that just went on with Destiny. Yeah. It's so weird. But yeah, that was it was a probably the best way to try and give some depth to Kira, given the circumstances, which kind of make it difficult, which is following up with Destiny in any way at all.
Yeah. It's just surprising me being able to talk with you, because there's so much that actually kind of does work, but it's bundled in this strange mess of a dumb movie.
Yes.
But it's really interesting to talk about, and it's really interesting to find the layers that they ended up putting in, and the interesting small things that will work, while being a dumb as hell movie.
Yeah, so I don't know if I will watch this movie again. I guess it's probably going to be on Netflix at some point. That seems to be where the Gundam movies go. And Sunrise does want this or Bandai does want this to reach as large an international audience as possible, and Netflix is the best place for that. So I think it will show up there, probably with the dub and with the subtitled version. Maybe I'll watch it again. I don't know. I feel like I maybe don't have to. It's delivered the catharsis that I kind of needed to kind of close the book on Seed in my life. I'm actually looking to sell my old DVDs now. I'm just like, okay. I think I'm at peace with this now. I can maybe let it go.
The Evangelion 4 effect.
Yeah. It funny how they can kind of pull that off given what they did. And I did have one final thing I wanted to say about the movie. Just I don't want to. Another thing I also don't want to spoil too much is the music, but it does do music very well. They brought Toshihiko Sasaki back to do the score. It is wonderful as always. A lot of it is reusing stuff from the series, but the soundtrack really plays like a countdown to the hits. And I found it was really effective and really kept me engaged. There's other fun surprises with the music I won't spoil, but it's really satisfying. And of course we get new music from TM Revolution and Seesaw, which I'm not super pumped about those songs. They're not as good as the old ones. No, but it's still nice to see them all back.
I like the Seesaw one a little more than I like the TM Revolution one.
Yeah, it's great. And Nami Tamaki did a new song, I think, too, but I don't believe that was actually in the movie. I think it was just...
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, it was just released as like a cross-promotion, which, good for her. So, yeah, I think that's all I have to say about Gundam Seed Freedom.
I think so. There's not a whole lot to say about it.
Yeah.
It's a dumb movie. It's fun. And if you like Gundam Seed, you probably should watch it.
If you like Gundam Seed, you should watch it. You may not be able to explain why you liked it, but I think you will probably like it. Yeah. I should have tried to get Daryl Surratt on this podcast. I bet he has a lot of negative things to say about it. I bet he has I bet he has complaints. But we can leave it at that, I think. Yeah, and it was good to talk about Gundam Seed because it is the 20th anniversary of Bionics this year. So I'm not, as you may have noticed, I don't focus as much on that stuff on the podcast anymore. And I'm not going to do an episode about that, but I'm hoping for some chances to talk about some of the old shows from that block. So this is a nice little opportunity to revisit that too. Yeah. All right. Well, Randy, I think we'll wrap it up there. Where can people find you on the internet and social media?
You can find me on Twitter and more commonly Blue Sky now at Chandyran. That's where I'm at most of the time online. And then you can find me at Icon is where I'll be this year. That's really the only place I'm going. I'll be doing a bunch of panels like I usually do. I do a Name That Tune panel. I do a Saturday morning cartoons, which always gets a good crowd. And I'm doing some horror manga and horror movie panels this year, which I'm excited about.
Great. Yeah, I'm hoping I can get down to Icon at some point. Maybe next year. Maybe I can make that happen.
That'd be great.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for tuning in to Zon in Canada. You can reach me on Twitter at jbetteridge, or on Blue Sky, also at jbetteridge, and email zonandcanada@gmail.com. I'm not going to Icon. I'm also not going to Anime North, but I am going to Otakuthon in Montreal this year for the first time ever. And I don't know what panels I'll be doing yet because I haven't gotten my approvals, but hopefully I'll be doing some good ones. Hopefully I'll be doing something related to Bionic's 20th anniversary. We'll see what gets approved. But yeah, come say hi there if you want. So the theme song for the podcast is by Ultraclystron and can be found on his album Packet Flood, and you can find that at ultraclystron.com. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast app of choice, and I'll see you again.